Welcome back to California Cooking. It's Super Bowl weekend and we have got a championship menu lined up that'll score points with both the football and the foodie fans. First, I'm making a homemade mac and cheese topped with Kansas City style burnt ends. Then, for the Philly fans out there, you can't go wrong with a cheesesteak. So I'm making my version of Philly's iconic dish. And you wanna know who serves up the best Philly cheesesteak here in LA? We're taking you there. Let's start with what some would say is the barbecue capital of the world, Kansas City. The Mac Shack at Arrowhead Stadium serves this game-winning dish. So I decided, let's recreate it. It's their burnt ends mac and cheese. Normally burnt ends take 12 hours. I did in 3. Let's take a look. It's Super Bowl, and that means it is time to eat. And one thing, I think when you think about Super Bowl, you think about big food, and this big old hunk of meat is gonna get us started properly with a Kansas City burnt ends mac and cheese. And I was reading about some of the food they serve at Arrowhead Stadium, and yes, and Theo's into it too. One of the things they serve at Arrowhead Stadium is this bowl of mac and cheese, and on top are these barbecue burnt ends and crispy onions. So I'm gonna do a take on that. But here's the thing about burnt ends. It became a hit in Kansas City. It's basically the burnt little edges of a barbecue brisket. I don't have a smoker, and I'm not gonna drag out the grill, so I Googled, how do you do burnt ends in an oven? Basically, I found this recipe. It's called Poor Man's Burnt Ends, and it's using a chuck roast, which is what I have here. This is about 2 pounds. And you cook it low and slow in the oven for 3 hours. Then you cut it and cube it, put it back in the oven with some barbecue sauce, crank the oven up, and it, from what I hear, gives you these crispy, saucy burnt ends. So we're gonna give it a try and see. First thing, dry rub. So to do that, just probably some things you already have in your pantry. I'm gonna eyeball it, but about a teaspoon of each. So I've got chili powder, some chipotle powder or cayenne. I'm gonna maybe do a half. Garlic powder, onion powder if you have it. I didn't have onion powder, so. Smoked paprika, and dry mustard is another one of the spices they suggest. So a teaspoon of dry mustard, a big fat pinch of salt, because this much meat, you need a lot of salt. Cracked black pepper. And that's your rub. And then what you're gonna do is you're just going to massage all of this into your roast. Get it all coated. Because as they say with barbecue, it all starts with the dry rub. Now you could let this sit overnight or a couple of hours if you have time in the fridge. There you go. So you put it on a wire rack on a baking sheet. You put this in the oven, 275, low oven, 3 hours, and then I'll show you what it looks like. Our chuck roast is done, and what you wanna do is you wanna let it sit, because you're gonna wanna handle the meat and cut it into cubes, and if it's hot, it'll just make things too difficult. So it's sat at room temperature for about an hour, low and slow, 275, 3 hours. And you can see, even from the dry rub, how you can see the crust is formed all along there. I mean, that's good. We're on our way to getting burnt ends. Try to cut across the grain. Basically, just get a sharp knife. It cuts really easy. Now to the second step of the 2-step process. We take our roast, cut up into cubes, onto a baking sheet. We've got the barbecue sauce. Douse it. This is where you just go. And honestly, I would get 2 bottles of sauce, because you're gonna want extra sauce for after these cook up. Here's the kicker. Pats of butter. I'm gonna do about a half a stick. The recipe called for a stick, which that's just too crazy. So half stick butter, dot it around. Take our tongs, and I just wanna get everything coated in the sauce. In the oven, 450, 475 even, 30 minutes. So I happened to see on Instagram at Arrowhead Stadium, where the Kansas City Chiefs play, One of the things they serve at the stadium is this bowl of mac and cheese and then the burnt ends on top with some crunchy onions. So I'm gonna make some mac and cheese. First of all, let's start with the noodles. I've got our elbow macaroni, big pot here that I'm gonna salt and then drop in our elbow mac. Let's see, 7 to 8 minutes. That is going. And then in here, I happen to have heavy whipping cream. So I have probably a cup of that and then a cup of whole milk together in here. Warming up, and you don't want to get the milk to a boil, but you do want to warm it because you're gonna melt the cheese in there. And in this bowl I found a blended cheese that said mac and cheese blend, but it's American cheese, sharp cheddar cheese, regular cheddar cheese, whatever you like, but I kind of went with the classics, just cheddar and American. So once your milk is warm, you're gonna add in the cheese and it just creates this kind of cheesy, yummy sauce. Okay, and you just take a whisk and you just blend. While my cheese is melting, I'm gonna pull out the burnt ends because halfway through the cook time, you wanna flip them. It smells like a legit barbecue joint in here. Okay, there we go. This is what we want. See all those little bits that are blackened? And give these guys a flip. You might ruin your pan in the process, but I think it's well worth it. Oh my gosh, does this smell good. Back in. This is like a yummy, cheesy, creamy sauce. Just milk and cheese and a little heavy cream. Noodles are done. I undercooked them just a little bit because I want to pop it in the oven and warm it all the way through together with the cheese sauce. So cheese sauce is melted. To our cheese sauce, just to give it a little something, some smoked paprika and a little bit of the dry mustard. You really don't need salt. I mean, that's the kind of crazy thing is the cheese is so salty. I salted the water of the noodles. So salt is optional. And then on top of it, we're putting the burnt ends and barbecue sauce and crispy onions. So I think, rarely will I say don't salt, but I think this is one of those times. Baking dish, buttered. Noodles going into the cheese bath. And then we just stir and get everything coated in the cheese. Oh my goodness. Ah, is there a more beautiful thing? You could top it with shredded cheese, but I ran out and used all of it in the sauce, but that's okay. And that goes. Burnt ends coming out. I think we might have fooled them. Those look burnt and they look like ends. And our mac and cheese, bubbly and beautiful. This is how I would serve it on Super Bowl Sunday. I've got my buns in case you want to do a sandwich. You've got your crispy fried onions, or you do your mac and cheese and you top it with the burnt ends. The meat is so tender, caramelized. I think this is also something different, and it represents Kansas City. I'd set up a bunch of bowls, just a little station where people can come over and make their own. Mac and cheese, get a couple of these burnt ends on top. A little extra barbecue sauce, because why not? And then the way they did it in the stadium, the crispy French fried onions on top. And there you go. This will be a hit at the Super Bowl party. Kind of ridiculous. That is decadent. Wow. Coming up, we've represented KC and their famous barbecue. Now it's time to show some love for the city of brotherly love. We're taking you to a place grilling up one of the best Philly cheesesteak sandwiches in town. But first, I'm making my own Philly cheesesteak sliders at home. That's coming up next. It's the most iconic dish in all of Philly, and the perfect comfort food for game day. These Philly cheesesteak sliders will make even Pat and Gino blush. Okay, time to represent Philly for the Philadelphia Eagles. And what do we think of when we think of Philadelphia? Philly cheesesteaks. And I know I'm gonna hear from all the Philadelphians who are saying I'm not doing a proper cheesesteak. And I get that, but I'm gonna do my best to do at-home cheesesteak sliders. So I've got my little slider buns. Here's a beautiful ribeye steak. And I popped it in the freezer for 30 minutes because you want it cold. Because we're gonna saute up the meat. For the cheese, I know it's a debate. I hear that it's provolone all the way when it comes to a Philly cheesesteak, although sometimes they do have Cheese Whiz on there. So what I did is a combination of provolone and American cheese for the meltiness. So I've got 2 cheeses going on, and then our green peppers, onion, and that's it. So let's get started. So first things first, the steak is cold, so I wanna cut that first into slices, as thin as you can get it, because Philly cheesesteak, all about thinly sliced steak. So you wanna, again, go against the grain. I would imagine there's also, and I know I've seen it at Ralph's and where they have pre-sliced steak. I just wasn't able to find it, but I would say if you do, go for that. Save yourself the trouble. On to our peppers and onions. So first, let's do the green pepper. And I'm gonna, usually you'd see it maybe in strips, but I'm gonna do a chop because slider buns, tinier pieces are better. And I've had a proper Philly cheesesteak. I remember I was living in New York City, and my girlfriend Nikki is from Philly, and she had went home for the day and visited Philadelphia, and she came back on the train that night with, I forget if it was at Pat's or Gino's, but she came back with a Philly cheesesteak. So it probably wasn't the best experience considering it was probably a couple of hours after being made, but it was still amazing. And then we're gonna do the same with our onion and do it fast before we cry. Small dice of the onion. Hey Theo, you want a Philly cheesesteak, bub? Okay, onions, peppers, done. Now let's go to the back, we'll saute up our steak, and then we'll move on to the veggies. Time to cook up our steak. So I've got a big skillet and melted butter in this, and I'll tell you why I melted butter in a minute, but let's use a little of that in the pan with some olive oil. Pretty high heat because this is gonna cook really quickly. It's so thin. Before we add it to the pan, we're gonna salt the meat, pepper. I've got my little brioche buns, and I'm gonna just coat them with a little bit of melted butter on top so they get extra nice and toasty. Some garlic powder, and I'm gonna warm these in the oven. All right, oil and butter ready for our steak. Going in, single layer so they don't crowd each other. And don't touch it. Let one side get nice and brown and then flip it over for the last couple of seconds. Okay, almost done. Let the meat get brown on one side. Meat is done. And now, what's left in the pan, leave it in there. In goes our peppers and our onions, some salt. And then you're gonna just cook these until soft and all the juice and flavor from the meat. While that happens, buns with the butter and the garlic powder in the oven just for a second to get warm. Also to my peppers and onions, just a few hits of Worcestershire. While our peppers and onions cook, I have our buns, and I toasted just the top in the oven with butter and garlic, but here's what I'm gonna do with the cheese. I think bottom layer American, and I'm just gonna lay it over, because they're so tiny, these buns, I'm just gonna lay it over all the slices like that. You wanna cover every bit of the bun. Peppers and onions done. Gonna put the steak back in, add everybody back together, you pile it on. It's hard to keep everything inside of a little slider, but we'll do our best. To that is our provolone, which is the classic Philly cheesesteak cheese. Now, buns go back on, and we're gonna pop it back in the oven to warm the cheese and get everything all gooey and melty. Okay, our Philly cheesesteaks out of the oven. I just tented them in there for a few minutes just to get the cheese nice and melted. I think the easiest thing to do, they're cut all the way through, but the easiest thing might be to just take them all over at once onto a platter. And then just because they're cute and I happen to have them, and it makes it a party when you've got the little picks. Representing Philly, our classic, not so classic, Philly cheesesteak. Okay, I've been admiring this guy. Philly cheesesteak sliders, come on. Philly, I hope it did you proud. I don't know if it's Pat's or Gino's, but it's good. Coming up, if you're looking for one of the most authentic Philly cheesesteak sandwiches in town, Eric Spillman has got us covered. He's taking us to a delicious spot coming up next. I love a good Philly cheesesteak sandwich. Recently, I had a very elevated version at Matu in Beverly Hills. It was so good. But if you want that quintessential Philly cheesesteak, you gotta check out Boo's.
Jessica, you know this. I've spent a lot of time in Philadelphia. My wife is from Philadelphia, my in-laws, everybody. And you know what? Sometimes you just get a hankering for a real Philly cheesesteak. One of the best places to go is this place right here, Boo's Philly Cheesesteaks and Hoagies. They say it's the realest cheesesteaks you can get in Southern California. Okay, so we're here with Andrew Ahn. He's the owner of Boo's, and you're from Philly.
I'm from Philadelphia, yes.
So what happened? Did you notice that there was an absence of authentic Philly cheesesteaks here?
For a while, yes. And the reason why we opened this spot was because my dad, when he moved to LA, he asked me, where can I get a good cheesesteak?
And there wasn't any place?
Not one. And so he's like, all right, we have a problem, let's solve it. It's comfort food. It's something that, you know, people in Philadelphia have grown up with since they were kids.
So what constitutes a good Philly cheesesteak?
I think one of the main things is the rolls. So these Amoroso rolls, which we ship in from Philadelphia.
So the bread is from Philly?
Philly, yeah. It's a specific type of roll that's really particular to Philadelphia. And so we use the rolls. We use authentic ingredients that you would find anywhere in Philadelphia. And that was really important for us. And it's a style that how we chop the meat. And then we offer like cheese whiz, provolone, and a white American. We use decent lots and deli meats for our hoagies and fried cheese. So
whiz is really the traditional cheesesteak, right?
Not necessarily. Some parts of Philly is whiz, but I mean, I grew up where a provolone and white American was what we offered from where I grew up.
To really have a real Philly cheesesteak, it's wit, right? I mean,
when you say wit, that just like in some parts of Philly, you know, you go to Gino's and Pat's and they have this whole whiz wit, but that just means with onions without.
Right. So if I come up to the front and I don't say wit or without, or I don't answer that, you're still serve me one.
We got you.
Okay. All right. Yeah. This is what they call the low-calorie plate. Awesome.
We're all about full calorie action here.
So I'm like a cheesesteak connoisseur because I've spent so much time there. Look at this. This is whiz, right?
Yeah, so whiz with mushrooms, peppers, and onions.
It would be bad to like use a fork with this. Because that
no,
come on, you don't use a fork. With
you would just get down and grind with it. Yeah, just go at it.
I mean, here we go.
Oh, there it goes. Went straight for it.
That's outstanding.
All right,
they're really
cool.
I'm going to have to be going into a coma here in just a few minutes. It's fantastic. I mean, you can really taste the cheese, you can taste the onions, you can taste the meat. It's excellent.
Thank you.
So I feel like I'm in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
So if there's some rude sports fans here, like rooting for the Eagles, you know, right around here, I would feel right at home. And let's talk about this. This is
steak fries. So we just throw a steak and cheese whiz on your fries, and that's a meal in itself. So we got that, and you can always add like different, like people will add like mushrooms and peppers and onions on that as well.
There's nothing like cheese and fries, and you know, steak is a good addition.
Exactly.
slightly lower calorie offering that you have here?
Oh, so this is the Logan, the off-the-menu item, and it's named after one of our customers that has been coming for many years, and it's that chicken cheesesteak with mayo and mustard, with American cheese, and it has crushed pepper flakes. This is going to be a little spicy, so it's not a Philly thing, it's just a booze thing.
That is really spicy though.
Woo. So people that love the spicy stuff, you could get the spicy Logan, and people love it.
Outstanding. My mouth is on fire, but really good.
Yeah.
All right, well, I think you've sort of brought me to Philly.
Yeah.
And still be in Silver Lake? I think we're there. All right, I know you probably have a lot of fans. I mean, do people come like over and over again?
Yeah, we have a lot of regulars. When the Eagles are in town, we're really busy. We have a lot of Philly fans out here that just always vouch for us. They're our biggest cheerleaders as well. So it's great. It's you know, and then those guys are telling their friends from LA or wherever, like, hey, these are real, these are authentic, these are legit. So you know, shout out to those guys from Philly that show us a lot of love.
Philly people are the real people, man. They're the salt of the earth, right?
Yes, we
My
are.
wife constantly tells me that.
We're very blunt,
So I
we're
agree.
honest. It's
You are.
It's about honesty. So.
She's honest, you're honest, everybody's honest. That's a good thing, right?
It's a good thing, it's a good
Yeah. It is comfort food. I think what Andrew was saying is it's comfort food. It just makes you feel relaxed and comfortable and just happy. Basically, eating this makes you feel happy.
Oh my gosh, Eric, my mouth is watering, and I'll take the Wit Whiz. What a perfect meal for Super Bowl Sunday. Now the table's set. All that's left to do is enjoy the game. Good luck to both teams, and I'll see you next week. Theo, yeah. Oh, good stuff.